But before we get into the back squats, we are going to do some stretching. I'm thinking a solid 20 to 45 minutes of just smashing lacrosse balls into her groin, maybe a bit of quads, maybe just couch stretch for like, I don't know, 10 minutes on each side. How does that sound, everybody? Are we excited?
What's up? This is Ben from WODprep, and in this video, we are going to teach you the top 3 mobility myths. So if you've been in the CrossFit or functional fitness space for any amount of time, you probably have heard some pretty serious misinformation regarding mobility, regarding injury, regarding rehab, regarding what lacrosse balls and foam rollers do. Don't worry, in this video, we're going to go over a few myths and debunk them for you so that you, as an athlete, can feel better, move better, and perform better without all this pressure to do hours and hours of mobility every single day. I am here with special guest Dr. DePalma and special guest Dr. Joe Camoratto. They are both WODprep coaches. They both coach people one-on-one and also do a lot of stuff inside of our WODprep Masters program. And they specialize in teaching things to our athletes that are actually backed by science. If you are someone who's interested in things like mobility, pain, and preventing injury, I have some free resources that I'm gonna give you at the end of this video. So stick around to the end. I'll give you some sexy, juicy, free information that you will love. But for now, let's go over the top 3 mobility myths. So the first thing that we need to do is define what is mobility. I know when I started CrossFit, when I started functional fitness, I thought mobility was taking a band and doing a whole bunch of various stretches and painful movements that made me able to do heavy weightlifting better. Like, that was my concept of mobility. So let's define that in a better way. Joe, what do you got?
Sure. So if we look at like medical literature or scientific papers, mobility is just defined as the ability to move. There's not anything special about joint tissues or structures or anything like that. It's just our ability to move. And it's usually used in a hospital setting where, is a patient mobile? Yeah, they can move, they can get up and walk. And so our kind of compromise definition is the ability to achieve a position. Trying to get into a snatch, trying to get into a deep squat, deadlift position, these different, yeah.
Okay, so in the terms of this video and how it relates to you, when we talk about mobility myths, our definition of mobility is being able to get into the various positions that CrossFit or this sport demands of us, whether that's pistols, overhead squats, the front rack for the clean, yada, yada, yada. It's about, can we get into those positions? That is mobility. CJ, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, just a little bit. So a common mobility definition that a lot of people have learned from the various educational pieces is the ability to control movement through space. And so at that point, I think we're really reaching, I don't think that's a good definition, but that is a common one that we've seen in a lot of the CrossFit literature. Mobility is defined as your ability to control movement through space. It sounds really fancy and cool, but I don't think it actually accomplishes the true design or the true meaning of mobility. I think it specifies it too much. And so yeah.
So the first myth that we are going to address, and this is one that I hear about all the time, is myofascial tissue release. And I say that just sarcastically because I remember as a coach going, all right, everybody, grab your foam rollers and we're gonna really break up our fascia on our lats, and that's gonna help us be able to clean better. I mean, you've probably seen something like that. Coach Joe, talk to me about myofascial release. What is that?
Sure. So it's the attempt at improving range of motion through breaking up tissue with inanimate objects, which is a tough one because it kind of goes against what we know about the robustness of tissue, right? If you can picture your ability to break up your muscle tissue with a lacrosse ball, there's probably a lot of other things that aren't or are more, stressful than that can also cause damage to the body, which would be, let's just say, putting a 200-pound barbell on your back probably would release a lot of your shoulder and spine from the rest of your body. And so trying to...
So you're saying if a lacrosse ball is touted to be able to break up myofascial tissue of my lat, if that was actually true, then there'd be a lot of other things that would just completely destroy us as humans, like squatting heavy weights, things like that.
Sure.
If I punch you really hard in the shoulder, I would maybe rip your shoulder out, but the bottom line is that doesn't happen.
What happens is that we get a sensory input, right? There's sensations that we feel at the area that we're putting that, and sometimes they're painful, and when we take that painful stimulus away, it feels better.
Oh my gosh. Oh. I'm ready.
And the nervous system is pretty easy to fool. If we do something and then we do, like, let's say an overhead range of motion, we do really anything and then do that overhead motion again, it's probably going to be better just because we have done that recently and
Sure.
You do it again.
But lots of things can accomplish that same response that might be more effective as far as our training is concerned. And what I mean by that is, instead of digging a lacrosse ball into your chest, right, to help improve we'll say extension, right? Or internal rotation. So this position here. You could just go into a push-up and hold the bottom of a push-up position for 5 seconds, even if it's a little uncomfortable. So if it is, then you could just do a box dip, right? And you're still going to get that same response, but you're also going to get a little bit of the resistance benefits that you get from actually doing exercise. And it's the active pattern, right? And so one thing that we really focus on here at WODprep and within me and Joe's practices is prioritizing active and resistive approaches to rehab or pain or injury or discomfort over passive ones, because we know that that's how we're going to create the adaptation. We're not looking for the short term. We know the short term can be accomplished with just about anything, especially lacrosse balls and foam rollers. And, we have that short term response, and that's what people are attracted to, right? We've been conditioned to think that short term response is actually creating structural change, and it's not.
So what I'm hearing is, rather than taking the inanimate objects and jamming them in places that hurt and trying not to grimace and like doing all this stuff, it's like sometimes the best thing that we can do is to just do the movement and gradually expose ourselves to that movement more. I know for me, overhead squatting was a big issue for a long time. So I thought it was my ankles, and I thought I needed to mobilize my ankles more. I thought it was my shoulders. I thought I needed to mobilize my shoulders more. I thought it was my upper back, so I had to really mobilize my T-spine, right? And then I just started overhead squatting more. Luckily, I learned from CJ a long time ago that mobility in the traditional sense that we know it as OG CrossFitters isn't really that effective. What's maybe more effective is putting a barbell overhead and trying to do an overhead squat. And then when you get more comfortable at it, you can maybe add a little bit more weight or a little bit more range of motion. And that could be, and probably is, more effective than all of these random things jabbing you and making you feel painful.
Yeah, one of the major themes that are going to be with these myths is that we would hate for people to think that they can't train because they weren't able to mobilize, that we're putting a barrier in front of them. They haven't done their foam rolling, they haven't done their flossing, therefore they can't be active, and that really is detrimental to the health of the person in the population, really.
Yeah, so don't ever think that because you don't have your floss bands, your $45 lacrosse ball with little nubs on it, you don't have your drill tool that punches you a million times a second. If you don't have those tools, guess what? You can still work out. You just need to warm up the movement and then gradually expose yourself to either more range of motion, more weight, and that is the ultimate mobility hack. All right, myth number 2. This one is really going to upset my old football coaches, my soccer coaches, my basketball coaches, my strength and conditioning coaches. What's secret or myth number 2?
Myth number 2 is that stretching does not prevent injury or improve performance.
No way. I don't believe it. Stretching is good for me.
I mean, not really. It's good if you like to do it, but not if you want to, I guess, quote unquote, optimize things or perform better. Yes, you can have short-term changes in how you're feeling or the flexibility that you're having, but as far as things that need to happen for you to train, stretching is not one of them.
How is that possible? For years and years and years, I played a lot of sports. Stretching before exercise has always been something we need to do. And after, got to stretch. You got to lengthen my muscles. I got to make those muscles longer. What's going on there?
Yeah, so I think the issue stems from the definition of stretching and what's actually happening. And so what we think is happening is that we're lengthening the tissue, right? So, and that is incorrect. What's actually happening, or our theory, is that we are improving our tolerance to just stretch. So the symptom during stretching, you feel that tightness, is highly subjective, okay? And there's no true objective way to measure that tight feeling, right? Because everyone feels it a little bit different. So like Joe was saying in our myofascial release, reach for your toes, stand back up and reach again, you can get further, right? Why? Because we have tricked the nervous system, like he was saying, and we are now more tolerant to be in that lengthened position, or more tolerant to stretching. So what happens is basically a gymnast, compared to me, I can barely touch my toes. A gymnast can, put their whole body in half, right? They are just very tolerant to stretch, and they are able to just go into a further lengthened position without any resistance, okay? That doesn't mean that they are more likely or more unlikely to get injured. Gymnasts have a very high injury rate, okay? And so if that was the case, the more flexible you were, the less likely you would be to be injured, and we know that that's not true.
Okay.
We have very good evidence that has zero.
So there's no data to back up. If I'm more flexible or have more mobility, wink, wink, then I'm going to get injured less. There's no evidence to suggest that.
No, not at all. And so going back to our efficiency topic in piece 1, stretching is time consuming.
Intensive. I remember I tried to learn how to do a split because I thought that was a thing that would make me an elite athlete.
Yeah, sure. And so I have a desire to do a split, right? I do. But I know the only way to do that is to work specifically to do the split. Will that change my performance, deadlifting, squatting, snatching in any way? Highly unlikely, because I'm very conditioned and very primed to do those movements specifically, okay? Now, if your goal is to reach for your toes better, stretching is going to help you get there. That is for sure, but it most likely will not improve your ability to squat, okay? So
if I want to get better at squatting, what should I do then?
you should probably squat.
Probably squat.
Right, spend
okay.
time in the bottom position, right? So spend time in the bottom of the squat. So what we do and what we suggest instead of this passive stretching, right, like we said in piece 1, we want to focus more on active and resistive things because they're going to create more adaptation over a long period of time, is we want to find, or we want to avoid the passive, right? And stretching is generally passive. There's no gravity
What's
against
an
us.
example of a passive stretch?
Just like reaching for your toes, okay? And so instead, what we can do, right, because just the ability to tolerate stretch doesn't really change our ability to perform. What you still have to do for football, after the whole team stretches, right, you do your coordinated stretching, which is what everyone does, what do you do next? You get up and you start running.
Right.
And you do agility drills, and you do them at 40%, and then you do them at 60%, and then you do them at 80%. So why not skip the static stretching and just go into that? Do the thing, right? Do the thing. And it really is, it is that simple, and I know this is a pretty informative and deep video, that it really is the best way to get better at whatever it is we're trying to get better at, or get a better position, an overhead squat, or a squat in general, is to do the thing, okay? And we're not saying stretching is bad. We're not saying myofascial release is bad, right? Or the act of using foam rollers is bad.
We're saying it has a much higher value placed on it than it should.
Correct, right? And if you enjoy it, that's fine. If you're reliant and dependent on these things to improve, or you think that it improves your performance, we're here to tell you that it doesn't, and that your priorities and time can be better spent in terms of better focused on more practice, right? Doing the thing.
And another really prime example of this specifically that I've used in the past, and then we're going to move on to myth number 3 here in a second, is the pistol. Like the pistol squat, it's like, oh, my ankle needs more flexion, so I'm just going to like do some crazy bandage stretch for my ankle. And oh, my hip needs more mobility, so I'm going to do some crazy hip things. The way that I got better at pistols, like anecdotally, like myself, my own experience, was just doing pistols. And if I couldn't do them to full depth, I did them to half depth. And then when I could do them to full depth, I did some banded pistols. Just actually doing the movement with some sort of modification allowed me to now be able to drop and boom, I can do a pistol right off the bat. No warm up. And that's because I practiced a bunch of pistols. I didn't sit there and work on my left ankle range of motion with a lacrosse ball for hours and hours and hours. That's ultimately like tying a bow on stretching and myofascial release aren't what you need to get better at these specific movements.
I think something that gets confused is that range of motion gets confused for skill, right? If you are better at doing the movement, you'll be better at doing the movement. If you have more skill at doing a pistol, you won't really need the range of motion because you're just better at doing that movement. It's not so much of a range of motion thing, you're just better at doing the movement because you've been exposed, you've practiced, you've done repetitions.
And that leads us directly to myth number 3, which is more mobility does not mean more performance.
Yeah, so this is kind of just rewording our number 2 to kind of make it more practical to CrossFit and our situation at hand. So more mobility equals better performance, and we know that that's not true, right? Highly mobile people can perform poorly. Like it doesn't mean that their ability to snatch is better, right? And so the way you get better at snatching is you snatch a lot and you do the thing. Doing the things over trying to stretch your way or mobilize, grind your calf or
sitting in front of a TV screen and
Right.
holding the pigeon pose for 48
Right.
minutes
That's so painful.
is just going to help you get better at doing the pigeon pose.
Right, and it is, and it's going to do exactly that. Focus on practice and making sure that if you want to be better at X, Y, and Z skill, we do those over these secondary things and these passive interventions.
So before we shot this video, Joe looked at me and said, Ben, can you imagine a world where, and I'm going to let you finish that.
Can you imagine a world where we didn't foam roll or do anything passive before our CrossFit or our exercise or our activity, and we just took a barbell, 45-pound bar, we did 10 squats, 10 deadlifts, 10 overhead presses, and 10 bent over rows, 3 sets, and then we just went into our workout.
Wow.
There wouldn't be the narrative that we can break things up, that we're fragile, that we need to do things before being active, because there is 80% of the population is not active enough. And so we want to stop putting barriers in front of activity. We want people to be healthy, we want the population to be more active, and saying you have to do X, Y, and Z before you can move is not how we do it.
I love it. So rather than trying to think about what tool do I need to buy to increase my mobility, what specific program do I need to follow to finally do a movement, it's better to just practice the movement. And that's why actually in a lot of WODprep courses, we aren't telling you, when we're trying to teach you a muscle up, guess what we're doing? We're doing pieces of the muscle up. That's it. When we're trying to learn double unders, we're not smashing our calves for an hour. We're just practicing jumping for a while.
You're developing skill.
Right? We're developing skill, and that's what we need to apply to all realms of fitness. So if you have a workout that has, let's say, back squat and push press in it, for your warm-up, maybe do some back squat and some push press at a lighter weight, and you're gonna be amazed at how well that works. So the bottom line is that if you're trying to get better at CrossFit, one thing that you can do prior to the workout is to practice the movements that are in the workout. Obviously, when it comes to learning a skill, that seems pretty intuitive. But when it comes to things that require mobility, you don't need to do fancy mobility tactics, and you don't need to use expensive mobility tools. You just need to do the thing. Do the movement that you're trying to get better at. Do it a lot, do it frequently, and you're gonna get a lot better at that movement. So if you like this video and you want to learn more about how to increase your mobility, or even more importantly, how to prevent yourself from getting injured, we have a special checklist that these guys put together for you, and I want to give it to you for free. Look at the top comment below or in the description of this video. There's a link. Go to WODprep.com/injury if you just want to type it in, and we will send you a 5-step checklist to help you prevent injury in the future. And also, preventing injury will also equate to helping you move better and pain-free. I hope that you like this video. Leave a comment below and let me know what the biggest myth is. Or if you have any questions, I'm going to make sure that these guys are in the comments, because I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of people that's like, that's wrong. This one guy says that I need to do this, and it worked for me. That's fine. Let's have a discussion in the comments. I know there was a lot of things said in this video, but bottom line is do the thing. Do the movement that you were trying to get better at, and let me know how it goes. We'll see you in the next video.
So we're going to spend a good 30 minutes of your hard-earned dollars paying for this class just stretching, and then maybe at some point we'll pick up a barbell, do a couple squats, and then throw you right into it. And then maybe if we're lucky, we'll be able to squeeze in an exercise session at the end.